Hi guys, Jade Johnson here. I'm going to do a quick clip today about something that I think is going to be very important for future videos to come, especially because I intended to make my second video talking about how to start one's journey. But I realized that as we're talking about that and other topics, I never want to take for granted that everyone has the same understanding or same vocabulary that I might be using or intending in my videos. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what people mean when they talk about the unicorn or the gingerbread man of identity, right? And more specifically, it's do we all have an understanding of what it means to have variation in sexual orientation versus gender identity versus gender presentation, okay? These are all three different things, and one does not lead to the other necessarily, okay? Now, this is very important because, anecdotally speaking, I could think about my own journey, which I'll get to in a moment, but I had a real learning curve as far as what was I struggling with. Was it related to my sexual orientation? Was it my gender identity? Was it maybe both? Okay, so here we go. Something else like the last video where I said you can Google this and you can find probably a similar image. You'll probably be able to see the same thing. When we look at sexual orientation, that is something that people understand, I think, quite well. You know, are you straight, gay, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual? It's about what is your attraction to other persons and how does that relate to your sex and gender. So for example, if you are a male and you are attracted to women, then society will consider you a heterosexual male. If you are male and you're attracted to other men, then you will most commonly be considered a homosexual male. If you're attracted to both, you might be bi or pan, depending on that type of attraction, but it's really about who you're attracted to whom you're attracted, okay? That is not the same thing about your gender identity, which is how do you feel internally. It has nothing to do with who you're attracted to. Although people look at those groups of consideration together and they do work together a lot, it's different. So, for example, if you were born anatomically male and that's on your birth certificate and you've always grown up thought, yeah, I'm a boy, and then later I'm a man, what I see in my body corresponds to how I feel in my mind, in my head. There's no conflict. Then you are what the majority of the population, which is cisgender, C-I-S, cisgender. And that's really important because even though it's most of the population, most cisgender people don't know the term cisgender. So if you're a cisgender person, maybe you just learned a term about yourself. Now, cisgender's opposite is transgender, trans meaning across, because when you're transgender, what that means is your internal feeling of your gender does not match the body you were born with, right? So in my case, for example, on my birth certificate, my original birth certificate, state of California, it'll read born male, okay? That's what they looked at, genitalia, and they made that decision, right? That's what physicians do in this country. They make that decision based on the genitalia. However, I know that in other stories we talk about, I've known, as long as I can think about, that never felt right for me, okay? In my own expression of how I'm interacting with people physically, whether that's, an emotional connection relationship, a physical or sexual relationship, something did not feel quite right about that. And even I think about our internal avatar, how we see ourselves kind of as we daydream going throughout the world. Oftentimes for transgender people, that internal avatar, that shape, that body, that does not match what they were born with, okay? So they would fall into the transgender category. So that's why oftentimes you talk about female to male transgender, those who were born with female considered genitalia and then transition to men, or male to female transgender, such as myself. those who are born with male genitalia and then transitioned to live life as female. And actually, I always talk about we're all learning. Let me just actually in this video real time, not edit, just do it real time. Let me amend and be more clear and specific. Oftentimes people think in order to be transgender, you have to change your genitalia. So I was just using those as examples because it's easy to understand, but I want to be super clear. And we'll talk about this in later videos about everyone's different journey. The change of gender by surgery is not a requirement to be considered transgender, okay? If your internal sense of gender does not match what your body is currently presenting, you might consider yourself transgender. You do not have to say, well, I'm waiting for these surgeries or the surgery to be transgender. That's not how it works. Many people decide not to have the surgery. Many people can't have the surgeries. Everyone's journey is different, but it's about the mismatch between the internal identity and what your body is presenting, okay? The last one is gender presentation. Now, this is interesting because, again, I like to throw in stories about where along my own journey, I had to teach myself things that I maybe had different notions about. We all have room to learn, right? So gender presentation is how people carry themselves in society, and how, based on how they carry themselves, people will establish how they're acting. So an example of this is you might have someone who society considers, you might have a male who presents, as society would say, very effeminate, okay? A very effeminate acting male, okay? Or if you think about tomboys for little girls who sometimes are into sports, or when they get older, sometimes people use terms like they're more masculine or they're more butch. Because of their presentation, that's what they're presenting to the world. Now, what's very important about this is your presentation is not going to be dictated by your gender identity, right? So if you go through your journey and say, well, no, I feel confident that I am a transgender female, for example, that does not mean that you have to say, okay, well, in order to be complete or for society to accept my identification as a trans female, I need to wear high heels and earrings and makeup. No, that is your decision about how you want to present to the world. That's your presentation. It's not the same thing as your identity, but your identity will often persuade your presentation, of course. And then inversely, you might be a female to male transgender, for example, and say, well, I know that I feel male. I consider myself a trans male, but does that mean that I need to go play sports every day or these societal expectations? No, that's not what it is. You might do that, and a lot of people do, because that's how their presentation is. Maybe they're more jocks, maybe they want to present more masculine, but one does not have to dictate the other. And then, of course, in a separate video, we're going to talk about, something when you fall in between, either by presentation or identity. So with falling in between for identity, maybe you fall into the non-binary category, okay? So you don't feel exclusively female, exclusively male. That's why it's non-binary. From the presentation standpoint, maybe you present yourself androgynous, okay? So the way you want to present is not what you consider stereotypically female, not stereotypically male, but just to the point where it's maybe in between, maybe neither, maybe both, but it's androgynous. So it's not just two poles on each of these things. There could be a spectrum in between. So this is what you have to remember when talking to people about their journeys or considering your own. Always make sure that you don't just assume from the first thing, for example, oh, well, like when we grew up in the 80s and 90s, oh, well, this guy likes other guys. He is a gay man, he must be effeminate, and he's going to have to do this. Those are stereotypes. Some of those things that you might consider that particular gentleman in that example is going to do may happen if that's their journey and their lifestyle, but it's not a guarantee, okay? So always when you want to be considerate about talking to people, you want to consider what is that person's sexual orientation, meaning to whom are they attracted? What is their gender identity? How do they feel about themselves up here? Their gender identity, how do they associate? How do they identify? And then what is their presentation? Okay, so you could get a variety of combos, right? You could have a cisgender female, born with female genitalia, always felt female, who is attracted to men, so she'd be considered heterosexual. So cisgender, heterosexual, but her presentation is androgynous because that's what she wants to present, right? Everyone has a different combination. So that's quite a bit. Go back and watch again, but I always remember it's not as simple as they're gay, straight, and it trickles down from there. You have your sexual orientation, your gender identity, and your gender presentation. Those three things together make up all of the beauty of our various journeys. Just something to keep in mind as you're having these more open and mature conversations with your colleagues and your friends. Have a great day.